My name is Diana Calloway. I'm 31 years old, and I want to tell you about the moment I knew, with absolute certainty, that I had to leave my own home. It wasn't a dramatic moment. There was no screaming, no broken dishes, no door slamming hard enough to shake the walls. It was a Tuesday evening in October. I had just come home from a 12-hour shift, still in my work clothes, carrying a bag of groceries I'd picked up because I had not eaten since 7 that morning. She had also, by every account, never fully updated her understanding of Marcus from the version she had raised to the version that existed now. The Marcus she referenced in conversation was often younger than the one sitting in the room. The Marcus she described making decisions for, worrying over, knowing the best interests of, that Marcus was a child. The one across from her was 32 years old with a master's degree and a career and, eventually, a wife. These two versions of Marcus lived in Renee's mind in a specific hierarchy, and the adult one was always slightly subordinate to the child one. I noticed this. I smiled through it. I told myself it was normal, that mothers struggled with this transition, that it would settle with time. I was wrong, but I didn't know that yet. Marcus proposed on a Sunday morning in our apartment. We were renting at the time, a 2-bedroom in South Charlotte, with a ring he had clearly thought about for months and a speech that was not rehearsed but was better for it. He told me what he loved about me in specific, concrete terms, the way an engineer describes the load-bearing properties of something he has measured carefully and trusts completely. I said yes before he finished. We got married the following spring. 50 guests, a venue with a garden, a cake that was slightly too ambitious structurally but delicious. Renee was in the front row in a dress the color of champagne, and she cried during the vows, which I found touching. At the reception, she gave a toast that was warm and generous and included, briefly, a sentence that I would remember later with a different understanding than I had in the moment. She raised her glass and said, "Marcus, you will always be my home. And Diana, welcome to the family." At the time, I heard, "welcome." Later, I would understand that the sentence had a structure worth examining. Marcus was her home. I was the one being welcomed. To her family. As if the family, including Marcus, was hers, and I was the new arrival. But that was later. In the moment, I smiled and raised my glass and felt genuinely happy, which I was. I was happy.
I want to be clear about that.
The happiness was real. The problems were also real. Both things were true simultaneously, and the distance between them was the distance the story covers. The apartment was my idea. Not buying property in general, we had talked about that together, agreed it made sense, started saving with the specific purpose of a down payment. But the particular apartment in the particular building in the particular neighborhood of South End Charlotte, that was mine. I had found it. I had done the research. I had run the numbers 6 times from 6 different angles and presented Marcus with a spreadsheet that he reviewed, asked 3 precise engineer questions about, and then said, "This is the right move." We bought it 14 months after the wedding. A 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom unit on the 7th floor of a building that was 12 years old, well-maintained, with morning light that came through the east-facing windows in a way that made the living room look like a photograph. I cried a little when we got the keys. Not from sentiment exactly, from the specific feeling of something you have worked toward arriving in your hands as a physical object.
We moved in on a Saturday.
Marcus's sister Stephanie came to help, and we ordered pizza and assembled furniture until 11 at night, and it was one of the best days I can remember. Renee came to see it the following weekend. She walked through every room the way people walk through rooms when they are assessing rather than visiting, slowly, with her eyes taking inventory. She paused in the doorway of the 2nd bedroom, the one we were using as a home office, for a long moment. "This would make a good guest room," she said. "We use it for work," I said. "But guests can use the pull-out in the office if they visit." She smiled. "Of course." I did not read anything into it. That was my first mistake. Not my last. The call started about a month after we moved in. Not to both of us. To Marcus. Long calls in the evenings that he took in the bedroom with the door not quite closed. I could hear the tone but not the words, his voice low and patient, the specific register he used when someone he loved was telling him something difficult. I asked after the 3rd one if everything was okay. "Mom's having a hard time," he said. She's lonely. Since Stephanie moved to Denver, she's in the house alone and it's been hard for her. I'm sorry, I said, and I meant it. Genuine loneliness is a real thing, and Renee living alone in a 3-bedroom house in Concord, 40 minutes north of us, was a real situation. What does she need? She's okay, Marcus said. She just needs to talk sometimes. I accepted this. I made a point of calling Renee myself once a week, on Sunday afternoons, to check in. She was always pleasant on those calls. Warm, even. She asked about my work. I'm a hospital administrator, long hours, a lot of operational complexity, and she listened to my answers and asked follow-up questions. I thought we were building something real. I thought we were becoming, slowly and genuinely, family. I didn't know the calls to Marcus were about something more specific than loneliness. I found out 2 months later when Marcus came home from work and sat down at the kitchen table with the careful posture of a man who has rehearsed what he's about to say. I want to talk to you about something, he said. I sat down across from him. Okay. Mom's situation. It's gotten harder. The house in Concord is expensive. The property taxes went up and her fixed income isn't. She's struggling, Diana. Financially. And she's alone. I waited. I was thinking, Marcus said, that she could come stay with us for a while. Just temporarily. While she figures out her next steps. I looked at him. In the 2nd bedroom. Yes. The home office. We could rearrange. Marcus. I said his name the way you say someone's name when you need them to slow down and be in a room with you. I'm not opposed to your mother visiting. I'm not even opposed to her staying for a few weeks if she needs to. But I need us to be clear about what temporarily means before I say yes, because temporarily can expand in ways that are hard to reverse. He looked at me steadily. I know. So, what does temporarily mean? A few months, maybe 3. While she sells the house and finds something smaller that works for her budget. 3 months. I turned it over. I thought about Renee in our guest room for 3 months. The Sunday calls, the warm questions, the champagne-colored dress. It was not my ideal situation. I valued our space. I valued the particular quiet of evenings in our apartment, the rhythm Marcus and I had built, the life that fit our dimensions. But 3 months was 3 months. And Marcus's mother was lonely and struggling, and he was asking me, carefully and directly, with his eyes honest and his hands still on the table. 3 months, I said. And we set expectations clearly before she comes. About shared space, about routines, about... Yes, Marcus said. Absolutely. I'll talk to her. He talked to her. Or he said he did. Renee arrived on a Friday evening in March with 4 suitcases, 2 boxes, a ceramic pot collection, and a framed photograph of Marcus at age 7 that she hung in the hallway without asking anyone. I looked at the photograph, then at the nail she had put in my wall, then at Marcus. He was carrying the ceramic pots to the kitchen. She'll find a spot for those, he said, like it was obvious. Like the ceramic pots on our kitchen counter were a natural outcome of events rather than a choice someone had made without consulting the person whose kitchen it was. I said nothing. This was mistake number 2. I said nothing in that moment because I was choosing patience, choosing generosity, choosing the long view. What I did not understand yet was that in this particular dynamic, silence was not generosity. It was information. And the information it communicated was, this is acceptable. You can do this here. Renee settled into the 2nd bedroom with a thoroughness that was, in retrospect, telling. She did not unpack like a guest. She unpacked like someone moving in. Every drawer in the room filled. Closet organized with the careful system of a person who knows they will need to find things easily. A small routine established within the first week. Her coffee time, her television programs, the specific chair she preferred in the living room. My chair. But I have already told you about that. The first 3 weeks were manageable. Genuinely. Renee cooked dinner twice a week, which she was skilled at, and the food was good, and it was one fewer thing I had to think about after long hospital days. She was company in the evenings when Marcus worked late, which happened regularly. She asked about my day, with what seemed like real interest. It was in week for that things shifted. It started small, the way these things always do. A comment about how I loaded the dishwasher. Marcus has always done it this way, it works better. A rearrangement of the pantry that I discovered when I reached for something and found it 3 shelves from where I had put it. A suggestion, offered lightly, that the reading chair might be better placed against the opposite wall where the light is more even, don't you think? I moved the chair back the next day without comment. Renee moved it again 2 days later. I moved it back again. She waited a week and moved it again. I understood then that we were not having a disagreement about furniture placement. We were having a disagreement about whose home this was. And the disagreement was being conducted entirely in the language of household objects, which meant it was very hard to address directly without sounding like a person who had a deranged attachment to a reading chair. I brought it up with Marcus that weekend, calmly, specifically. I told him about the chair, the pantry, the dishwasher commentary. I told him it was not about any individual thing but about the pattern of things, which was starting to feel like a negotiation over territory that should not be in question. Marcus listened. He nodded. He said, "I'll talk to her." He talked to her. 2 days later, Renee made a comment about how I hung my coat by the door. Month 2. I want to be precise about the timeline because precision matters when you are describing how something that was supposed to be temporary becomes something else. In month 2, several things happened. Renee began having opinions about groceries. Not preferences, opinions. She would look at what I had bought and make assessments. This brand is better. That one has too much sodium. Marcus doesn't eat this. Why did you buy it? The last one was the one that stopped me cold because Marcus absolutely ate it. I had watched him eat it 17 times, and when I said so gently, Renee smiled in the way that is not a smile and said, "Well, he probably just didn't want to hurt your feelings." I went to the bedroom and stood at the window for 5 minutes. Then I came back out and made dinner. In month 2, Renee also began answering my phone when it rang, and I was not in the room. Not my cell, the landline we had connected for her convenience during her stay. But our number, our home line, and twice she picked up calls from friends of mine and had full conversations with them before I came in from another room to find her on the phone with someone asking after me. "Oh, she's here," Renee said, and handed me the phone without a trace of awareness that anything unusual had occurred. In month 2, and this is the one that told me everything I needed to know about where we were heading, Renee asked Marcus for a key.
Not asked me.
Asked Marcus. For a key to an apartment that had my name on the deed. Marcus gave it to her. I found out when I saw the key on her keyring, a small copper-colored copy that had not existed a week before. I asked Marcus about it that evening and he said, "She needed one in case. She went out while we were at work. For security. In case something happened."
"You didn't ask me," I said.
"I didn't think. This is my home, Marcus. My name is on this deed the same as yours. A key to this apartment is not yours to give without asking me." He looked genuinely surprised. Not defensive, surprised. Like the thought had not occurred to him that a key to a jointly owned property was not entirely his to duplicate and distribute. Like the apartment, in some version of reality he was operating in, was his to manage in a way that didn't require consulting me. That look told me something I filed away for later. "I'm sorry," he said. "You're right. I should have asked." "Yes," I said. "You should have." He apologized. I accepted it. We moved on. The key stayed on Renee's keyring. Month 3 arrived and the conversation about next steps did not happen. I raised it. Specifically, carefully, on a Sunday morning when we were alone in the apartment. Renee had gone to a church service and we had 2 hours of quiet. I made coffee and sat across from Marcus and said, "It's been 3 months. What's the plan?" He shifted in his chair. "The house in Concord is listed." "I know. Has it had offers?"
"Not yet.
The market is slow right now." "Okay. So, what's the timeline?" He looked at his coffee cup. "I don't know exactly. The realtor thinks maybe another 2 months before the right buyer comes." 2 more months. Maybe. Could be sooner. I sat with that. "Marcus, I want to be honest with you. I agreed to 3 months. We're at 3 months. I'm willing to extend. I understand the house market is not something anyone controls. But I need you to understand that extending has a cost that I am carrying more of than you are, and I need you to see that. He looked up from his coffee. What do you mean? I mean it's my chair she's sitting in. My pantry she rearranges. My grocery choices she comments on. My phone she answers. I am the person in this apartment who has been managing the friction of this situation every single day for 3 months, and I need you to know that, and I need you to be in this with me rather than in the other room while I handle it. Marcus was quiet for a moment. I didn't realize it had been that consistent. I know, I said, because I haven't wanted to make every small thing into a conversation. But the small things add up, and I'm telling you now that they've added up. He reached across the table and put his hand over mine. I'll talk to her, he said. Marcus. I know. I'll actually talk to her. Not just mention it. A real conversation. I looked at him, at the honest eyes and the hand over mine, and the man who had caught my joke at a birthday party and texted the next morning. The man I had married on a spring afternoon with 50 guests and an ambitious cake. Okay, I said. He had the real conversation. And Renee's response to the real conversation was the thing that changed the entire shape of what followed. She did not argue. She did not get defensive. She did not deny anything Marcus raised. She listened and she nodded, and when he finished she was quiet for a moment, and then she said, Marcus, I understand. I want to be respectful of your home, but I also want you to understand something. What? Marcus said. I helped you with the down payment on this apartment. You remember that. Marcus went still. I gave you $20,000, Renee said, when you and Diana were saving. I gave it to you because you needed it and because you're my son, and I wanted you to have something solid. I never asked for anything back. Mom. I'm not asking for it back now, she said. But I am saying that this apartment, I have something in this apartment. Not legally. I know that. But I contributed to it, and I think that entitles me to a certain comfort, a certain presence. And I think if Diana understood that, she might feel differently about things like where the chair goes. Marcus came to me that evening and told me what she had said. I listened to the whole thing without interrupting. Then I said, she gave us $20,000. Yes. As a gift. Yes. Did she say it was a gift at the time? Marcus thought about it. She said she wanted to help. She didn't say anything about expecting anything back. So now the $20,000 is the reason she gets to rearrange my pantry and sit in my chair and answer my phone. That's not exactly Marcus. I said his name carefully. I'm going to ask you a direct question, and I need a direct answer. Do you think that because your mother contributed to our down payment, she has some form of claim on how we live in this apartment? He was quiet for too long. I don't know, he said finally. I don't think it's that simple. I looked at him. Okay, I said. I stood up. I went to the bedroom. I lay on the bed in the dark and I stared at the ceiling and I thought about $20,000 and ceramic pot collections and a nail in my wall and a key on a keyring that no one had asked me about. And then, 10 days later, Renee said the thing that ended whatever patience I had left. I came home from work on a Wednesday to find Renee at the kitchen table with a notepad in front of her. She looked up when I walked in with the expression of someone who is prepared for a conversation. Diana, she said.
Sit down.
I want to talk to you about something. I set my bag down.
Iset.
She turned a notepad toward me. On it were numbers. A column of figures, neat and deliberate, the handwriting of someone who had thought about this carefully. I've been thinking, she said, about the situation here, about how long I've been staying, and about the contribution I made to this apartment. And I think it would be fair if we formalize things a little. I looked at the notepad. What does formalized mean? I think I should pay rent, she said. And before I could process the apparent reasonableness of that, she continued, and I think you should pay rent to me. The kitchen was very quiet. I'm sorry, I said. Can you say that again? I contributed $20,000 to this apartment, Renee said, with the patience of someone explaining something to a person who is being slow. That entitles me to an ownership stake. Not legal, I understand the legal situation, but moral. A moral ownership stake. And if we're going to be living here together, I think the arrangement should reflect that. I would charge you a below-market rate. Very reasonable. I've looked at comparable units in this building. I looked at the numbers on the notepad. She had calculated a monthly rent for Marcus and me to pay her, to live in our own apartment, that we owned, with our names on the deed. I picked up the notepad. I looked at the figure. I set it back down. I stood up from the table. I picked up my bag. I walked to the bedroom, closed the door, and called Marcus. Your mother, I said when he answered, just presented me with a rent calculation for the apartment we own. Silence. She wants us to pay her rent, I said, to live here, in our home, because of the down payment contribution. More silence. Marcus, I said, I need you to come home. I'm in a meeting. I need you to come home, I said again. Not louder, just more clearly.
Right now.
Because what happens in the next few hours is going to determine a lot of things, and I need you here for it. He came home, and what happened next was the beginning of the end of one version of our marriage, and eventually, the beginning of something that might be better. Marcus came home at 6:47. I know the exact time, because I was sitting in the bedroom watching the minutes on my phone, not out of impatience, but because I needed something concrete to focus on while I organized my thoughts into the kind of order that would allow me to speak clearly rather than from the place underneath clarity, where the real feelings lived. I had spent 45 minutes alone in that bedroom, doing what I always do when something large happens, breaking it into its component parts. Not the emotion, the facts. Because facts are what you can work with, and I needed to work with something. Fact. Renee had been in our apartment for 3 months and 11 days. Fact. She had been given a key without my knowledge or consent. Fact. She had systematically, incrementally, rearranged the physical and social landscape of our home to center herself in it. Fact. She had just presented us with a document, and I was using that word deliberately in my head, document, because it had been written down and calculated, which meant it was not a passing thought or a moment of confusion. It was a considered position, claiming a financial entitlement to space in an apartment she did not own. And underneath the facts, the thing I was not yet ready to name directly, but could feel the shape of, Marcus had known about the $20,000. He had accepted it. He had not told me at the time that it came with any strings because at the time it probably hadn't. But he had also, when I asked him directly whether he thought his mother's contribution entitled her to a claim on our home, said I don't know. Not no. Not of course not. I don't know. That was the fact I kept returning to. Marcus knocked on the bedroom door, even though it was his bedroom too, which told me he understood that something significant had shifted and he was approaching it carefully. Come in, I said. He sat on the edge of the bed. He looked tired in the way people look tired when the weariness is not physical. He had the expression of a man who had spent 45 minutes in a car preparing for a conversation he did not know how to have. Tell me exactly what she said, he said. I told him, word for word, as precisely as I could reconstruct it. The notepad, the figures, the moral ownership stake, the below-market rate, the comparable units. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment.
She's not serious, he said.
I looked at him. Marcus. She wrote it down. She did math. She looked up comparable units. That is the definition of serious. I mean, she doesn't actually expect us to pay her rent. She's expressing something. She's feeling. She's feeling entitled to something that doesn't belong to her, I said. And I need you to hear that sentence and not immediately reframe it into something more comfortable. He looked at his hands. The $20,000, I said. When she gave it to us, what did she say? Exactly.
She said she wanted to help.
She said she wanted us to have something solid. Did she say it was a gift? She didn't use that word. Did she say it was a loan?
No.
Did she say anything about expectations? About what she wanted in return?
No.
So she gave us money with no stated terms, I said, and now, 3 months into living in our apartment, she is retroactively assigning terms to that money. Terms that include a claim on our home. Marcus was quiet. I need you to tell me, I said, whether you think that's reasonable. The pause before he answered was 4 seconds. I counted them. 4 seconds is not a long time in most contexts. In this context, it was the length of a marriage holding its breath. I think, Marcus said carefully, that she genuinely believes she has some claim. And I think her feelings about that are real, even if the way she expressed it was
Wrong, I said.
the word you're looking for is wrong. Diana? Is it wrong, Marcus? Is what she did wrong? I need you to say it because every time something happens in this apartment, you say you'll talk to her, and then you have a gentle conversation that changes nothing, and then the next thing happens. And I need to know if you actually believe that what your mother is doing is wrong, or if some part of you thinks she has a point. The second pause was longer than the first. I think, he said very slowly, that it's complicated. She did contribute significantly to this apartment. She is my mother. She's struggling. I don't think her claim is legally valid, but I also don't think her feelings are. I didn't ask about her feelings, I said. I asked about her actions. Those are two different things, Marcus, and I need you to be able to separate them, because I cannot live in a marriage where my husband cannot tell me clearly whether his mother presenting a rent invoice for our home is wrong. Marcus stood up. He walked to the window. He stood there with his back to me for a moment, and I could see the tension in his shoulders, the specific posture of a man caught between two gravitational forces and being pulled apart by both. It was wrong, he said. To the window. What she did was wrong. Thank you, I said. But, he said and turned around, I also don't think she meant it the way it came out. I think she's scared, Diana. She's 60 years old and she's selling her home, and she doesn't know where she's going, and she's been in this apartment for 3 months, and it started to feel like hers. That's not an excuse, but it's an explanation. I understand the explanation, I said. Now tell me what we're going to do about it. He looked at me steadily. I'm going to talk to her. I stood up from the bed. I picked up my phone from the nightstand. I looked at him with the full weight of 3 months and 11 days and a notepad with calculated figures and 4 seconds of silence, where that is wrong should have been immediate. Marcus, I said. I love you.
I want to be clear about that.
But I need you to understand something. If you walk out of this room and have another gentle conversation that results in nothing changing, I am not going to be able to stay in this apartment. Not because I'm making a threat. Because I genuinely do not know how to live in a place where my home is not my home, and where my husband cannot unambiguously take my side on something this clear. He looked at me. That's not fair. Which part? I am on your side. I'm always on your side. But she's my mother. I know she's your mother, I said. She's also a guest in our home who has decided she's something else. And those two things are in conflict, and I need you to resolve the conflict, not manage it, not soften it, not explain it to me in terms of her feelings.
Resolve it.
He left the room. I heard him knock on Renee's door. I heard the murmur of voices for 32 minutes. When he came back, I knew from his face before he said a word that something had shifted, and not in the direction I needed. She's very upset, he said. I imagine she is. She says she didn't mean it as a rent invoice. She says she was trying to start a conversation about the arrangement, and it came out wrong. She did math, Marcus. I know, but she's crying. She thinks you hate her. She thinks she's not welcome here. I looked at my husband standing in our bedroom doorway telling me his mother was crying. And I felt the specific, exhausting, clarifying feeling of understanding exactly how this was going to go. What did you tell her? I said. I told her nobody hates her. I told her she's welcome here. I told her the rent thing was a misunderstanding and we'd move past it. The room was very quiet. You told her she's welcome here, I said. Diana. After she handed us a document claiming financial entitlement to our home. You told her she's welcome. She's my mother. I'm not going to make her feel. What about how I feel? I said. Not loudly. Quietly, which was worse. What about the fact that I have been managing the accumulated weight of 3 months of this every single day, and I came to you tonight and told you clearly what I needed, and you walked out of this room and told her she was welcome? Marcus opened his mouth.
Closed it.
I need you to hear me, I said. Really hear me. Not process what I'm saying through the filter of what it would cost your mother to acknowledge it. I feel like a guest in my own home. I feel like every boundary I have is up for negotiation. I feel like when I bring something to you, you hear me, and then you go manage your mother's feelings and come back and report on them to me as if they're the relevant data. And I need that to stop. I need you to choose. Not between me and your mother. I'm not asking you to not love her. I need you to choose between the marriage we said we were building and the dynamic that has been growing in this apartment for the past 3 months. Those two things cannot coexist.
I need you to see that.
Marcus sat down on the edge of the bed again. He sat there for a long time. And then he said something I will remember for the rest of my life. Not because it was cruel, but because it was so completely, devastatingly honest about where he actually was. Diana, he said, I don't know how to make you both okay at the same time. I looked at him. I know, I said. That's the problem. I did not leave that night. I want to be honest about that because this story is not one where everything moves at the speed of clarity. Clarity arrives slowly sometimes, in pieces, and you have to live in the in-between while it assembles itself. I stayed. We slept in the same bed with the specific careful distance of people who have said true things and have not yet figured out what to do with them. In the morning, I went to work. Marcus went to work. Renee made coffee and left a cup on the counter for me with a note that said good morning in her handwriting, and I looked at that note for a long time before I drank the coffee. Because that was the thing that made it hard. Renee was not a monster. She was not, in the individual moments, cruel or cold or deliberately malicious. She was a woman who had spent 30 years being the center of her son's universe and had not been asked to vacate that position when he married me, and so she had simply continued being the center, continued organizing the world around her own comfort and primacy, because nobody had ever made it cost her anything to do so. The coffee note was real. The interest in my work was real. The dinners she cooked twice a week were real. These things coexisted with the chair, and the pantry, and the notepad, and the key on the keyring. Human beings are not simple, and Renee was not simple, and the complexity of her was part of what made the situation so difficult to resolve. You cannot have a clean confrontation with complexity. You can only decide what you are willing to live with and what you are not. I spent the next 2 weeks deciding. During those 2 weeks, 3 more things happened that I am going to tell you about because they are the 3 things that moved me from uncertain to certain. The first happened on a Thursday evening when I came home to find Renee on the phone with someone I did not recognize, giving our address. I asked, after she hung up, who she had given our address to. My friend Barbara, she said. She's going to come for a visit next weekend. Barbara is coming here, I said. To our apartment. Just for the weekend. She'll sleep in my room. You won't even notice her. I blinked. Renee, you cannot invite guests to our apartment without asking us. She looked at me with genuine surprise. She's my friend visiting me. In our home. Which I live in. As a guest, I said. You are a guest here. Guests do not invite other guests. The surprise on her face shifted into something else. Something that had been underneath the warmth all along, waiting for the moment when someone pushed far enough to see it. A coolness. A particular kind of stillness that belongs to people who are accustomed to getting what they want and are recalibrating when they don't. I think, she said, that my contribution to this apartment gives me more standing than a guest. There it was. The notepad again, wearing different clothes. Barbara is not coming, I said. I'm sorry, but that's my answer. I went to the bedroom. I called Marcus. I told him what had happened. He called Renee. Barbara did not come. But Renee did not speak to me for 4 days after that, which told me that the warmth had always been conditional, and the condition was compliance. The second thing happened during those 4 days of silence, which I found I did not mind as much as I probably should have. Marcus noticed I didn't mind. He mentioned it carefully one evening. You seem okay with her not talking to you, he said. I'm not happy about it, I said. But I'm not devastated either. Does that concern you? He was quiet. It tells me something, he said. It tells me something too, I said. The third thing happened on a Sunday. Marcus and I had plans. We had made them 2 weeks prior. A dinner reservation at a restaurant we both loved, just the two of us, a rare evening that was ours. I had been looking forward to it specifically because our home had stopped being a place where I could exhale, and I needed 2 hours somewhere that was just us. 2 hours before we were supposed to leave, Renee came into the living room and announced that she wasn't feeling well. Not dramatically. Not with visible symptoms. Just, I don't feel well. I think it might be my heart. I've been having some fluttering. Marcus was beside her in seconds. What kind of fluttering?
Since when?
Should we call someone? I don't want to be a burden, Renee said. You two go to your dinner. I'll be fine. The way she said I'll be fine was not the way someone says they will be fine. It was the way someone says they will be fine in order to hear. Of course you won't be fine, we'll stay.
Marcus looked at me.
I looked at him, and I saw it on his face. The decision already made, the apology already forming. I saw him choosing in real time, and I saw which way he was choosing. We should stay, he said. I picked up my purse. I picked up my jacket. I said, very quietly, I'm going to the restaurant. I have the reservation. You should stay if you're worried about her. I hope she feels better.
And I left.
I sat at a table for two at a restaurant I loved, and I ate dinner alone, and I thought about what I had seen on my husband's face when he looked at me and chose. It was not anger I felt. It was something clearer and colder than anger. It was understanding. I understood in that restaurant that Marcus was not going to change in the time frame I needed him to change. Not because he was a bad person. Because he did not yet understand what it was costing him not to. He could not see it because what he was losing was gradual, a degree of my presence, a degree of my investment, a degree of the future I had been building in my imagination, and gradual losses are invisible until they are complete. He was going to need to feel the loss to understand its size. I came home from the restaurant, said goodnight to both of them, and went to bed. 3 days later, I started quietly looking for a short-term furnished apartment. I did not hide this from Marcus. That is important to say. I am not someone who makes secret plans and presents them as surprises. I told him on a Wednesday morning before work that I was looking at short-term furnished rentals. He stared at me. You're leaving? I'm considering it, Diana. Marcus, I need you to hear me without it becoming a conversation about your mother's feelings or my unreasonableness or what we owe each other. I need you to hear just this. I am not okay. I have not been okay for weeks. I have told you that in multiple ways on multiple occasions, and the situation has not changed in any meaningful way. I love you. I am not ending our marriage. I am telling you that I cannot continue to live in this apartment as it currently exists, and I need to make a change that will allow me to breathe, and I want you to understand why I'm making it before I make it. He was very still. If you leave, he said, she wins. I looked at him. This isn't a competition, Marcus. And the fact that you framed it that way tells me a lot about how you've been experiencing the past 4 months. That's not what I meant. What did you mean? He didn't answer. I'm not leaving to punish anyone, I said. I'm leaving because I need to be somewhere that is mine. Somewhere I can sit in a chair without it being a negotiation. Somewhere my name on the lease means what it's supposed to mean. He looked at me with an expression I had not seen on his face before. Not anger, not defensiveness, something rawer than those. Something that looked like a person beginning to understand the weight of what they're about to lose, but not yet fully believing it's real. How long? He said. I don't know. I said honestly. Long enough for things to change. What changes and how is up to you. I found a furnished studio apartment 4 blocks away. Month-to-month lease. I signed it on a Friday. I packed a bag that weekend. Not everything, not dramatically, not in a statement. Clothes for 2 weeks, my laptop, my books, the things I actually needed. I left the reading chair. I left my name on the deed. I left my wedding photograph on the nightstand. Marcus stood in the hallway watching me pack with the expression of a man who had expected a different ending to the scene and could not find the line where he had made the wrong choice, because there had been so many choices and none of them had felt, in the moment, like the decisive one. I don't want you to go, he said. I know, I said. Tell me something different is possible and I'll stay. He was quiet. I picked up my bag. I hugged him, a real hug, long and genuine, because I loved him, and the hug was true even when everything else was complicated. I felt him hold on a moment longer than I expected. I'll call you, I said. Okay, he said. His voice was the voice of someone trying not to show how much something costs. I walked past Renee's door. It was closed. I did not knock. I took the elevator down. I walked 4 blocks in the October evening air. I let myself into a small furnished studio that smelled like someone else's cleaning products and had furniture that was not mine and windows that faced west instead of east. I sat down on the edge of the unfamiliar bed, and I took the first full breath I had taken in 4 months. The studio apartment was small enough that I could see every wall from the center of the room. In another context, that would have been a limitation. In this context, it was exactly what I needed. 4 walls, all of them mine. A kitchen no one would rearrange. A chair, a small, slightly uncomfortable armchair the landlord had left, that I could sit in without negotiating. I sat in it the first evening, and I read for 2 hours, and I did not hear anyone else's television program, and no one commented on what I had bought at the grocery store, and the silence was the kind that belongs to you rather than the kind that is imposed on you, and those two silences are entirely different things. I want to be honest about those first days because the honest version is more complicated than the version where leaving is immediately, cleanly liberating. It was liberating. It was also lonely. It was also the specific loneliness of someone who has removed themselves from a difficult situation and is now sitting with the full weight of how the situation became difficult in the first place, which is a lonelier thing than the difficulty itself because the difficulty at least gave you something to manage. I miss Marcus. That is the plain truth, and I will not dress it up. I miss the version of our apartment that had existed before March. I miss Sunday mornings and the coffee he made without being asked, and the way he caught jokes that other people didn't catch. I missed my reading chair in its correct position by the east-facing window. What I did not miss, and the clarity of this surprised me, was the constant low-level vigilance. The monitoring of every room before entering it. The calculation of whether this was a moment to say something or absorb something. The management of my own reactions in real time, while simultaneously trying to read the room and anticipate the next incursion. I had not realized how much of my energy had been going to that calculation until it stopped being necessary. I slept deeply for the first time in months on the first night in that studio. Marcus called the next morning. Not late, 7:15, before I would normally have left for work. I answered on the second ring. "How are you?" he said. "Okay," I said. "How are you?" "Not great." I waited. "She made breakfast," he said. "She made enough for 3 people." She kept looking at the door. I didn't say anything. "Diana, I don't want to do this wrong. Tell me what you need." "I need the thing I told you I needed," I said. "I need the situation to actually change. Not the conversation about it. The situation." "I know. I'm thinking about how." "Okay," I said. "Think about it. I'm not going anywhere. I'm 4 blocks away. Take the time you need to actually think, and when you've thought, tell me what you've decided." "What if what I decide isn't what you want?" "Then we'll have a harder conversation," I said. "But let's not have the harder conversation before you've actually decided." He was quiet. "I love you." "I love you too," I said. "That's not the question." We hung up. I went to work. I put in a full day managing a hospital system that had its own considerable chaos and found, as I always did, that other people's concrete problems were a useful thing to solve when your own problems required a patience that couldn't be forced. My colleague and closest work friend, a woman named Audrey who had known me long enough to read my face without requiring explanation, looked at me over lunch and said, "You seem different." "I moved out for a while," I said. She put her fork down. "Tell me." I told her the condensed version. The apartment, Renee, the notepad, the restaurant dinner alone. Audrey listened with the focused attention of someone who has strong opinions she is holding until you're finished. When I stopped, she said, "The rent invoice." "Yes." She did math. She researched comparable units. Audrey picked her fork back up, and Marcus said it was complicated. "In substance, yes." She said, which was Audrey's way of saying something she had decided not to say. "Say the I said. "The is, the rent invoice is insane, but Marcus saying it's complicated is the part I'd be watching." "I know," I said. "Do you know what you want out of this?" I thought about it. I want my home back. I want my marriage to function like a marriage. I want my husband to be able to say, without a 4-second pause, that his mother presenting a rent invoice for our apartment is wrong. Those are reasonable things, Audrey said. I think so. And if he can't give you them? I looked at my lunch. I don't know yet. I'm trying not to answer questions I haven't been asked yet. Audrey nodded. She did not push further because she was good at understanding where the edge of useful was. Day 4 of the studio apartment. Marcus called in the evening, later than usual. I could tell from the quality of his voice when I answered that something had happened. She went through your things, he said. I was still.
What?
I came home, and she was in our bedroom.
In your nightstand.
She said she was looking for Tylenol. There is no Tylenol in my nightstand. I know. What was she actually looking for? A pause. I don't know. She might have just been, I don't know. Diana, I don't know what she was looking for. What did you say to her? I told her she shouldn't go through your things. What did she say? A longer pause. She said that if you were here where you belong, you could get your own Tylenol. The studio apartment was very quiet. She said where you belong. I repeated. Yes. As in our bedroom is where I belong, and therefore my absence is the problem rather than her presence in my nightstand. Yes. I sat down in the slightly uncomfortable armchair. I breathed. Marcus, I said. What happened after she said that? I left the room, he said. I'm calling you from the parking garage. Okay. Diana, I'm starting to see it more clearly. What you've been describing. I think I haven't been. I think I've been managing the situation in a way that hasn't been fair to you. And I'm sorry. I waited. Because sorry was a starting place, not a destination, and I needed to know if there was more. I'm going to talk to her, he said. Marcus.
A real talk, he said.
Not a gentle conversation. A real one. I need to tell her that she has to find somewhere else to go. That the 3 months is over and the arrangement isn't working and she needs to make a plan. I sat with this. How do you feel about that? I asked. Not about what she would say. About how he felt. Terrible, he said honestly. She's my mother. Telling her to leave is going to feel terrible. But Diana, I walked into that parking garage and I stood here and I thought about you in that studio apartment that you didn't need to be in, and I thought about every conversation we've had in the past 4 months, and I thought about the notepad. And I thought, what kind of husband doesn't act on that? What kind of marriage survives a husband who doesn't act on that? I did not say anything for a moment. Have that conversation, I said finally. Tell me how it goes. Okay. Marcus.
Yeah.
I love you. I want to come home. I want to come home to our home. Make that possible. I will, he said. I'm going to. We hung up. I sat in the armchair until it was fully dark outside the west-facing windows. Then I made dinner alone in a kitchen that was temporarily mine, and I thought about east-facing windows and morning light and the apartment I had cried over when we got the keys, and I let myself want it back without forcing the wanting into certainty before the time for certainty had arrived. He called at 10:15 that night. I talked to her, he said. Tell me. I told her the arrangement wasn't working, that it had gone on longer than we'd agreed, and that Diana and I needed our home back, and that she needed to make a concrete plan with a concrete timeline for where she was going next. How did she respond? The pause was not a 4-second pause. It was longer. She cried, he said. A lot. She said I was choosing a woman I'd known for 5 years over the mother who raised me. She said she gave everything for me, and now, when she needed me, I was pushing her out. And I told her that wasn't what was happening. I told her I loved her, and I wanted to help her find a good situation. But that this apartment, our apartment, was not her home, and she had been treating it like it was, and that had to stop. What did she say to that? She said he stopped. Started again. She said that Diana had poisoned me against her. That you'd manipulated me into thinking she'd done something wrong when she'd only been trying to be part of the family. I absorbed that. And I said, Mom, Diana didn't tell me you went through her nightstand. I saw that myself. Diana didn't tell me you presented a rent invoice for our apartment. You gave me that information directly. And Diana didn't tell me you invited a guest to our home without asking. You told me about Barbara. I've been watching these things happen and telling myself they were complicated when they weren't. They were wrong. And I'm sorry it took me this long to say so clearly. The studio apartment was very quiet. Marcus, I said.
Yeah.
That's what I needed you to say. I know. I should have said it 3 months ago. You should have, I agreed. But you're saying it now. She's not speaking to me, he said. She went to her room and closed the door. I don't know what happens tomorrow. What happens tomorrow, I said, is that she makes a plan. And you hold to that. I will. And Marcus, the next time she cries, the answer is still the same. The tears don't change the facts. I know, he said. I'm learning the difference. I did not move back immediately. I want to be clear about this because the story is not over at the point where Marcus says the right things. Saying the right things is the beginning. The beginning requires a middle before it earns an ending. I stayed in the studio for another 2 weeks. Not as punishment, as observation. I needed to see what happened when Marcus held the position without me there to hold it with him. Because holding a position under the immediate pressure of a difficult conversation is one thing. Holding it through the days that follow, through the silence and the guilt and the tears reappearing and the subtle renegotiations that people like Renee conduct in the small hours of ordinary days, that is the harder thing. That is the thing that tells you who someone actually is. During those 2 weeks, Marcus called every evening. He told me everything. The morning after the conversation, Renee had come to breakfast as if nothing had been said, had made coffee for 2 instead of 3, and had discussed the weather. Marcus had repeated his position. She needed a concrete plan with a concrete timeline. She had cried again. He had held his position. She had called Stephanie in Denver. Marcus knew this because Stephanie called him afterward, bewildered and upset, saying their mother had told her that Marcus was kicking her out onto the street because Diana had given him an ultimatum. Marcus called me to tell me this. What do you want to do about Stephanie? I asked. Tell her the truth, he said. All of it. Are you sure? She deserves to know what actually happened. She's being given a version and making decisions based on it. That's not fair to her. He called Stephanie back. He told her everything, the chair, the pantry, the key, the notepad, the rent invoice, the comparable units, the nightstand. Stephanie, who was 4 years younger than Marcus and had, as a result, grown up with a slightly different version of their mother, listened to all of it. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, Marcus, she did the same thing to my first apartment. The furniture, the comments. I just didn't live with it as long as Diana did before I said something. Marcus told me this on the phone that evening, and I heard something in his voice I had not heard before. Not quite anger. The specific tone of a person who has received confirmation that they were not imagining something, that the pattern was real, that the difficulty was not a product of their failure to manage it correctly, but an actual feature of the situation. She did it to Stephanie too, he said. I know, I said. I didn't know it for certain, but I'm not surprised. Why didn't Stephanie say anything? Because it's easier not to, I said. Until it isn't. He was quiet. I've been making it easier for her my whole life. Yes. And the cost of that has been paid by everyone around me. Mostly yes. Diana.
Yeah. I'm sorry.
I know I keep saying that, and I know sorry isn't enough. But I need you to know that I see it now. Not just the last 4 months. The pattern. What I've been doing. What I've been asking the people I love to absorb so that I didn't have to feel the discomfort of disappointing her. I let that sit. That's a significant thing to see, I said finally. Don't unsee it. I won't. I mean it, Marcus. When she cries again, and she will, remember that you've seen the pattern. Tears are not proof that the pattern doesn't exist. I know, he said. I know. Renee found a solution on day 9 of what she had taken to calling, according to Stephanie, her eviction. She was not being evicted. She was being asked to honor the original agreement that everyone had made before she moved in, 3 months, temporary, while she found something suitable. The suitable thing turned out to be a senior living community in Concord, not far from where she had been, familiar territory, a 2-bedroom unit that she had looked at 6 months ago and decided against because she had preferred the idea of being closer to Marcus. She signed the lease on a Thursday. She told Marcus on a Friday, in a tone that communicated she was doing him an enormous favor by surviving this injustice with such grace. Marcus told me on Friday evening. "She's found a place," he said. "Good," I said. "She moves in 3 weeks." "Good." She asked if you and she could talk before she goes. She says she wants to apologize. I thought about this. Does she want to apologize, or does she want to have a conversation that ends with everything being okay? A pause. "Probably both," he said honestly. "Those are different things." "I know. I'll think about it," I said. I thought about it for 4 days. I met Renee for coffee on a Tuesday morning at a place that was not our apartment and not her soon-to-be apartment and not anywhere that belonged to either of us. Neutral ground. My choice, which Marcus had relayed and which she had accepted. She was there when I arrived, which meant she had been early, which meant she was nervous. I noted this, without assigning it too much weight. Nervousness is not the same as understanding, and understanding is not the same as change. I ordered coffee. I sat down across from her. She looked older than she had when she'd arrived in March. Or perhaps I was seeing her differently, without the layer of strategic warmth that had been her first presentation. What I saw now was a woman in her late 50s who had just spent 3 weeks discovering that the position she believed she held in her son's life was not as unconditional as she had assumed. That was not a small discovery. I was not without compassion for the difficulty of it. "Thank you for coming," she said. "Of course." She wrapped her hands around her cup. "I want to say I'm sorry. For everything. The way I came in, and I didn't see it while it was happening. I thought I was just being helpful. Being family." "I believe you," I said. "I believe you thought that." She looked at me. But intent and impact are different things. You can intend to be helpful and still take up space in a way that isn't yours to take. You can love your son and still use that love to justify things that aren't okay. She was quiet. "The rent invoice," I said. "I need you to understand why that was particularly significant. It came out wrong." "It came out exactly as it was meant," I said. "Not harshly. Clearly. You calculated figures. You researched market rates. That is not a thing that comes out wrong. That is a position that was held and then communicated. And the position was that your financial contribution to our home entitled you to a claim on it. I need you to understand that no amount of money, given voluntarily and without stated terms, creates that entitlement. Not legally. Not morally. Not in any framework that a functioning family relationship can be built on." She looked at the table. "The $20,000, she said. "I gave it because I wanted to. Because I wanted Marcus to have something solid. That's the truth." "I believe that's the truth," I said. "And I also believe that somewhere underneath that truth, you believed it created a connection to the apartment. A claim. And I need you to examine that. Not for my sake, for yours. Because if every generous thing you do comes with an unspoken entitlement attached, you will spend your life feeling owed by people who didn't know they were borrowing." She was silent for a long time. "I don't know how to be a mother-in-law," she said finally. And the way she said it, small, genuinely uncertain, was different from everything else she had said in the past 4 months. It was the first thing that sounded entirely true without any architecture around it. "I don't know either," I said. "I've never had one before. But I think it starts with understanding that your son's home is his home. His and mine. And that being welcome in it is a gift, not a right. And that gifts are maintained by how you treat them." She nodded. A small, careful nod. "I would like," I said, "to have a relationship with you. A real one. Not one built on me managing my reactions, and you not noticing. A real one, where we're honest, and where the boundaries of our home are clear and respected." "I'd like that too," she said. "Then we start from here," I said. "Not from March. Here." She looked at me with an expression I had not seen on her face before. Not the warmth that was strategy, and not the coldness underneath it. Something more unguarded than either. The expression of someone who has been seen accurately, which is uncomfortable and also, sometimes, a relief. "You're very direct," she said. "Yes," I said. I've found it's more useful than the alternative. Something shifted in her face. Not a smile exactly. The beginning of one. Cautious and genuine. Marcus told me, she said, that you're the reason the hospital's entire intake system got overhauled last year. That you redesigned it from scratch.
I did, I said. He's proud of you, she said.
He talks about it. He talks about your work the way he used to talk about his own when he first started. That specific way people talk about things they genuinely admire. I looked at my coffee cup. I didn't know that, I said. I should have led with it, she said quietly. Instead of the chair. Renee moved out on a Saturday in November. Marcus and I helped her. Not because we were required to, because it was the right thing to do, and doing the right thing even when you have not been treated well is one of the ways you maintain your own integrity through situations that could erode it. She took the ceramic pots. She took the framed photograph of Marcus at 7. She took her key back, which Marcus asked her for directly, and which she returned without argument, which was itself a form of progress. When the last box was in the moving van, she stood in the living room of our apartment for a moment. She looked at the east-facing windows. She looked at the reading chair in its correct position. She looked at me. It's a beautiful apartment, she said.
Thank you, I said.
We love it. She nodded. She hugged Marcus for a long time. She hugged me, shorter, careful, the hug of a relationship in its early stages rather than one that had reached any kind of ease. But real, not performed. I'll call, she said. We'd like that, Marcus said. She left. Marcus closed the door. We stood in the living room in the sudden, enormous quiet of an apartment that was ours again. He looked at me. Are you going to move back in?
Tonight, I said.
If you'll help me carry things. He looked like a man who had been told that something he had been afraid was permanent was actually not. Yeah, he said. Of course.
Right now.
We walked 4 blocks to the studio. We carried my things back in 2 trips. It took 40 minutes. When we were done, I stood in the middle of our living room surrounded by my returned belongings, and I looked at the east-facing windows and the reading chair and the lamp at exactly the right angle. Marcus came and stood beside me. I'm sorry, he said. For the last time, I thought. Not because he wouldn't mean it if he said it again, but because the apology had been made and received, and it was time to build rather than repair. I know, I said. Let's make dinner. That was 8 months ago. Here is what is true now. Marcus and I have a therapist. Not because our marriage is in crisis, because we decided together that we wanted to understand the patterns that allowed a crisis to develop and make sure we had tools for the next one. She is a calm and perceptive woman named Dr. Okafor who asks excellent questions and does not let Marcus use the word complicated as a destination rather than a starting point. He is learning in that office the difference between loving someone and being managed by them, between loyalty and compliance, between she's my mother as a reason and she's my mother as an excuse. These are not easy distinctions, and he does not learn them all at once. But he is learning them, and he brings what he learns home, and we talk about it, and the talking is real in a way our talking was not always real in the months before. Renee calls on Sundays. Not every Sunday. We have not established a rhythm yet, but regularly. The calls are shorter than the ones she used to have with Marcus alone. They are also more honest, which makes them more valuable even when they are more uncomfortable. She asks about my work, and I tell her, and she listens. Last month, she asked if we could come for dinner at her new apartment. We went. She cooked. She showed me where she had put the ceramic pots, arranged on a shelf above the window where the light hit them in the late afternoon. They looked good there. I told her so. She looked pleased in the uncalculated way of someone receiving a genuine compliment rather than managing toward an outcome. We are building something. Slowly. With the specific care of people who understand that what they are building is fragile, and that fragile things require attention and honesty, and the willingness to say hard things before they become impossible things. It is not easy. It is real. And real is what I wanted. I am sitting in my reading chair as I tell you this. East-facing window. Morning light exactly where it should be. Coffee on the side table. Marcus in the kitchen, making eggs, off-key humming something from the radio. I look at this chair, The chair that started as furniture and became a negotiation and became, eventually, the clearest possible symbol of what was at stake. And I think about what I would tell someone in the middle of their own version of the story. Their own apartment or their own family or their own version of standing in a doorway feeling like a guest in a place with their name on the deed. Here is what I would say. Name it early. The small things are never just small things. They are the early drafts of the large things, and if you address them when they are small, you do not have to address them when they are enormous and entrenched. I waited too long. I absorbed too many small things in the name of patience, and what I told myself was generosity. What I was actually doing was providing information that my silence was an acceptable response. It was not. And the cost of that communication was 4 months and a studio apartment, and a marriage that had to be partially rebuilt. Require clarity from your partner. Not perfection. People are not perfect, and the person you marry will sometimes get it wrong, will sometimes default to old patterns in moments of pressure, will sometimes disappoint you with a 4-second pause where an immediate answer should have lived. This is human, and it is survivable. What is not survivable long-term is a partner who cannot be reached. Who cannot, when given clear information about what is happening and what you need, find their way to your side. Marcus could be reached. It took longer than it should have, but he came. That mattered. Your home is yours. This sounds obvious. It is apparently not obvious, because the violation of it happens constantly, in small increments, in the language of helpfulness and family and love, and by the time you see it clearly, you are already deep inside it. Your home, the place with your name on the lease or the deed or the utility bill, the place where you should be able to exhale, is yours. Not a referendum. Not a negotiation. Not subject to the moral arithmetic of whoever contributed to the down payment. Yours. And finally this. Leaving is not losing. Renee told Marcus I had left because Diana lost. I had left because I needed to breathe, and breathing is not losing. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is refuse to stay in a situation that requires you to make yourself smaller than you are. Sometimes walking 4 blocks and signing a month-to-month lease is the thing that makes clear, to everyone including yourself, exactly how much your presence is worth. I did not lose. I went 4 blocks away and I breathed and I waited for my husband to see what I already knew, that the marriage we had promised each other was worth more than the comfort of never disappointing anyone. That the home we had built together was worth protecting. That the woman he had married was worth choosing. He saw it. He chose it. We are still choosing it every day in the small, ordinary ways that are the actual substance of a life together. The coffee he makes without being asked. The jokes I make that he catches when no one else does. The Sunday mornings and the reading chair and the east-facing light. My name is Diana Calloway. I am 31 years old. I own an apartment on the 7th floor of a building in South End, Charlotte, and every room in it is mine, and the chair by the window is exactly where I put it. Come in if you're welcome. You'll know.